All right, here we go. So let me take a step back here. So on your outlines, and when we met last time on Thursday, we're working on ideas and writings. And so, for example, obviously homework should be turned in immediately. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what I was thinking? The word immediately is like, hey. Oh, well, let me stop what I'm doing here.
I was waiting until you
I know, I know. Okay, so back to what I was saying is that, so my concern, as always, is that you understand the material, all right? Because we've been doing this step by step, day by day, and you've got to have a plan about retaining it. I had this big discussion with someone about this, that you've got almost 2 weeks before your test. Remember, your test is on Tuesday, October the 3rd, okay? It's a ways away, okay? It's a ways away. And so the good news, of course, is that you have lots of time to study, to learn the material. But again, if you delay, if you forget, if you don't do what you need to do, then it's going to be like a catastrophe. And this is the last test for the end of the first 9 weeks. Right?
Is that the day before the break?
It is. Yep. Yeah. So going away present. All right. So for example, if I asked, Griffin, just tell me one thing about republicanism. What do you know?
Similar to Mayflower Compact.
Okay. I'm sorry. What do you say one more time?
It was similar to Mayflower
Yeah.
Compact.
Very good. In fact, you're probably the only person to remember that. The other class totally blocked out on that. Good. Bear, same thing.
Great question.
It's a good question.
Real good question. I think that's a great question for somebody else.
Oh, okay. So that's your warning shot. Okay, that's telling you something. Okay, Cole.
It's like putting away your like selfish desire for the common good.
Yeah, and that's what's the technical term for that I mentioned? Is associated with John Locke and Rousseau. There's actually a term that I talked about that. Yeah.
The social contract theory?
Very good. Thank you. Allie, come through. All right. Yes. I feel vindicated.
We'll do the same thing on test day.
Okay. I'm trying to tell you. Yes, we do. We want that on the same day on test day. Okay. Let's see. Emily, same thing. Something about republicanism.
Stability of society.
Okay. Not quite sure what that means.
Just that.
Just that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. You want to fill that in a little bit. Okay.
Did
Griffin?
anyone rely on the people getting good?
Yeah. And what was the term I used with that?
Civic virtue.
What's that?
Civic virtue.
Civic virtue. That's right. Okay. So you get the gist here is that you've got to learn this stuff. Okay. You got to learn this stuff. You got to learn this stuff. All right. Because again, if you just like sit on it and don't do anything with it or don't study properly, it's going to be bad. All right. So I'm reminding you out of kindness here because you have a little bit of time. But if you don't do what you're supposed to be doing, then it's on you, not me. Okay. Same thing, mercantilism. Okay. So give me Brindley, one thing about mercantilism.
Mercantilism, like the wealthy have all the power, and it has to do with like trading and shipping and stuff. So you can buy things.
Okay. Sorta, kinda, maybe. All right. Yeah. Driven. Yeah, excellent. I mean, that's like right from the book. Okay, the textbook actually has a lot of information about mercantilism. I read directly from the textbook, and which is something you need to do. All right. What else about mercantilism? Bear. Kill me, Bear. Lily, as you're staring at your notes.
I don't know what Griffin said, so I don't know what I can.
He almost quoted verbatim out from the book. Okay.
Well,
He's actually pretty amazing, unless he's looking at his notes as we do it. Okay. Okay, so this is, again, I'm telling you this in advance because if you have no idea what I'm talking about, or if you don't have enough information, or there's gaps, you need to get the, it's again, you know, you don't have key terms. You do have key terms, okay? But you have to do that work. You have to fill that out. You have to, you know, do flashcards or Quizlet or whatever, okay? But you need to have all that information somehow, okay? Yes? Okay, I'm a little concerned. I was a little bit upset with the other class yesterday and called them some names, okay? You know, because I can't tolerate laziness, okay? And so, you know, that applies to you, but, you know, okay. We already talked about Thomas Paine, okay? Thomas Paine, right? So there was 2 works again. The 2 works we focused on was Common Sense and American Crisis, right? And so you need to know at least something about Common Sense. Addie, what about Common Sense? What do you know? Okay, Lily, you know something. Okay, yes.
That it talks about how they should be free, and it targeted King George.
Okay, all right, good. What was the why was it so popular though? Why was it so effective? Okay, Griffin?
It was a pamphlet.
It was a pamphlet. Yeah, but you're not answering my question. Why was it so popular?
Because it was for the common man. It put the reason for independence in terms that people could get behind.
Good. And what year was that?
1776.
Yeah, easy one, right? Okay. Now, American Crisis is a little different, right? For those of you who did the, in fact, everybody did that worksheet, if you figured it out. What was different about American Crisis?
He was angry.
He's angry? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Maybe?
It was more about like
It was after the war began, and who's it directed primarily towards?
Soldiers.
The soldiers, right? The Sunshine Patriots, right?
Yep.
Talking again about this is a crisis where the Americans need to step up, right? The Patriots need to step up and realize again there's going to be a sacrifice involved. They're going to have to work hard, they have to fight, and so on. So, okay, all right, not too bad. Okay, so let's talk about another major thing you really need to be engaged and be awake for. Okay, so I'm looking at faces and I see a lot of yawns, and I need your attention. Yes. Okay. So the Declaration of Independence is the document. Okay, it is the thing. All right. With the American Revolution, and we talk about founding documents. If you're an American, all right, and you love America, and you think about American identity, and you don't know anything about the Declaration of Independence, shame on you, because this is like the foundation of the entire country, American identity. Okay. So what I'm gonna do first, I'm gonna show you a couple videos. Okay. And then I'm going to talk about it. In fact, we're going to read the entire thing. I'm going to explain it to you. All right?
Entire declaration.
The entire declaration. Yes. Word by word, line by line. Yes.
In all ye old format.
And exactly. I'm going to put a hat on and a wig, and there we
Well,
go.
was it 5th grade we had to memorize a whole section of it?
Letter.
lights.
Okay. Must have been before
All
you.
men are created equal, and they are endowed with the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Not so fast, Mr. Jefferson. These words from the Declaration of Independence and the facts behind them are well known. In June of 1776, a little more than a year after the war against England began with the shots fired at Lexington and Concord, the Continental Congress was meeting in Philadelphia to discuss American independence. After long debates, a resolution of independence was approved on July 2nd, 1776. America was free, and men like John Adams thought we would celebrate that date forever. But it was 2 days later that the gentlemen in Congress voted to adopt the Declaration of Independence, largely written by Thomas Jefferson, offering all the reasons why the country should be free. More than 235 years later, we celebrate that day as America's birthday. But there are some pieces of the story you may not know. First of all, Thomas Jefferson gets the credit for writing the Declaration, but 5 men had been given the job to come up with a document explaining why America should be independent. Robert Livingston, Roger Sherman, Benjamin Franklin, and John Adams were all named first. And it was Adams who suggested that the young and little-known Thomas Jefferson join them because they needed a man from the influential Virginia delegation, and Adams thought Jefferson was a much better writer than he was. Second, though Jefferson never used footnotes or credited his sources, some of his memorable words and phrases were borrowed from other writers and slightly tweaked. Then Franklin Adams offered a few suggestions, but the most important change came after the Declaration was turned over to the full Congress. For 2 days, a very unhappy Thomas Jefferson sat and fumed while his words were picked over. In the end, the Congress made a few minor word changes and one big deletion. In the long list of charges that Jefferson made against the King of England, the author of the Declaration had included the idea that George III was responsible for the slave trade and was preventing America from ending slavery. That was not only untrue, but Congress wanted no mention of slavery in the nation's founding document. The reference was cut out before the Declaration was approved and sent to the printer. But it leaves open the hard question: how could the men who were about to sign a document celebrating liberty and equality accept a system in which some people owned others? It is a question that would eventually bring the nation to civil war, and one we can still ask today.
Okay, that's the first one. Now, the next one is going to be connected to this. It's a scene from the John Adams HBO series. Have you ever seen that? If not, I highly recommend it. And you've got the three characters. You've got John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and they're talking about the draft. Okay, and so the draft of the Declaration itself. So they're reading it for the first time, and they're going to have this conversation. So I'll point out the characters here. That's John Adams. That's Franklin over there, and then Jefferson will be over to the side. That's Franklin, obviously.
This is something altogether unexpected. Not only a declaration of our independence, but of the rights of all men. This is well said, sir. Very well said. The Christian king of Great Britain has waged cruel war against human nature itself, in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere.
Yes, you lay the evils of slavery at the feet of the king, but you say nothing of slavery itself, sir. Now, surely, if the trade is outlawed but ownership is not, then those unfortunate Negroes still in servitude will become a more lucrative commodity.
Well, that's not what I intended, Dr. Franklin. Slavery is an abomination and must be loudly proclaimed as such, but I own that neither I nor any man has any immediate solution to the problem.
Oh, well, it is no matter. The issue before us is independence and not emancipation.
Dr. Franklin, this document is
Something our friends in the Congress will debate, but I would be very surprised if they will countenance an attack on slavery. Now, we hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable, that all men are created equal, etc. Sacred and undeniable. Smacks of the pulpit.
Is it?
These truths are self-evident, are they not?
Perhaps.
Self-evident then. Self-evident?
Self-evident.
Do not mistake me, sir. I
share your sentiment.
Every single word was precisely chosen. I assure you of that, Dr. Franklin.
Yes, but yours will not be the only hand in this document. Cannot be. They will try to mangle it, and they may succeed.
There may be expressions which I would not have inserted if I had drawn it up, but I will defend every word of it.
Well, that's what I believe.
This is a marvelous invention, Mr. Jefferson.
Yes, I went through a number of variations. This is by far the most successful. Simplest is always the best. It's 2 seats, and the top one swivels on rollers made from the window steps pulleys.
Oh, most ingenious.
Okay, all right. So let's get into the document itself. Here we go. All right, now there's a lot to this, okay? One of the things I want to address, and we'll get into what all men are created equal and all that kind of stuff, is the holding up slavery. Because remember, when we did the 1619 project, I talked about that. One of the common accusations today has been, that the founding fathers, and again, you're going to be we'll be talking more about who they are, but you already know the founding fathers, Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Hamilton, and so on. Why did they not abolish slavery? Okay, when we had the Declaration of Independence, the original draft, that Jefferson makes reference to slavery and puts kind of the blame on the King of England, which is a little bit ironic, remember, because Jefferson owned slaves, right? A number of the founding fathers owned slaves. And so there is this accusation of hypocrisy, of inconsistency, right? Yes, okay. And you need to hear this, and you need to get this, because again, if you're planning on going anywhere outside the school, going on to higher education, and anything like that, I guarantee you're going to get a professor, you're going to get other students and so on. We're going to be on this big thing about the founding of America is based upon this lie, okay, that we talk about independence, we talk about freedom, we talk about equality, blah, 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 and yet we have this huge problem called slavery, right? And so the part of the answer was in the video, all right, is that why did they not immediately abolish it? Part of it had to do with this thing because it was about independence, that the 13 colonies had to unify, right? That included the southern colonies, the ones that had the slaves. And so if Jefferson, if the original committee had said, okay, the wars about for independence includes the abolishment of slavery, what would have happened to the support of the southern states or the colonies? They would have bolted. They would have said, forget it. No, we're not going to do it, right? So the point is that the founding fathers knew the evils of slavery. They understood it, all right? They just didn't know quite what to do with it. Right, you got to put yourself in their position, right? They're saying first things first. We need to be a free country first, and then we'll deal with the issue of slavery, right? But it's not all in one setting, and so that's why a lot of times people today criticize it. They don't understand the story, right? So that's part of it, all right? So we have the Declaration of Independence. A lot of times the first obvious question is, what is it? Okay, and the reason I bring this up is because it's almost like it's an obvious thing, and yet people don't know. Okay, it's a Declaration of Independence. It's not a constitution. It's not other types of literature, right? It's literally a public declaration of the colony saying we want to be free. All right, and they give you the date, of course, July 4th, 1776. You'd be surprised how many people do not know about the 4th of July, why we celebrate the 4th of July. I guarantee you. When they do, you can go on the street interviews and people say, like, what do we celebrate on the 4th of July? And people go like, I don't know. It's like, wow, how far we've come, right? So let's take a look at we have the introduction. This is when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bonds which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and I'm sorry, this is in the appendix, this is A1, I'm sorry, go back to the end of your book. got ahead of myself there a little bit. In every U.S. history book, every government book, they always include in the back Declaration of Independence, Constitution, sometimes the Federalist Papers, sometimes. So that's A1. So A stands for appendix. All right, everyone there? Okay, back to the story. This is in the introduction to the laws of nature and of nature's God. Entitle them, A Decent Respect to the Opinions of Mankind requires they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. All right, and so again, in the introduction, it's literally saying we are telling you why. Okay, to the entire world that we want a divorce with the mother country. All right, and you'll also notice to the phrase nature's laws. What's that? It says nature's laws of nature or nature's God. Okay, so the document is steeped in a biblical worldview. Okay, now again, today if you take a government class, you go on. Others will say a lot of times separation of church and state, that God, Christianity, the Bible, and so on has no influence upon American history. That's a bold-faced lie. Okay, it's a bold-faced lie. Okay. In this case here, you're going to see that Jesus, God, the Bible, biblical worldview, this document only makes sense in that context. Yeah? Okay, all right, so far. Okay. You did it okay there? All right, Addie. Okay, here we go. Preamble. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Okay, so even the word truth is a biblical concept, okay? Because today everything's relative. There's no such thing as truth, right? And we're saying, yeah, there is, okay? And we'll say, well, what are these truths that are self-evident? And you already heard from Franklin up there saying, again, when something's self-evident, it's obvious. Everybody should be able to figure it out, right, or see it. Well, what are these self-evident truths? Here we go. That all men are created equal, okay? This is that very simple statement that is revolutionary, that is very deep, that is very controversial, okay? Because I guarantee you, in our culture today, equality is the catchword, right? And you have no idea what you're talking about. Okay, people have no idea what they're talking about, right? So let's kind of take it apart. All men. So a lot of debate is like, well, what about the ladies? What about the Indians? What about everybody else? Okay, so a lot of scholars will spend a lot of ink, a lot of debate, and I go to these symposiums all the time. Okay, and they'll say, see. These guys were they're racist, or they're only concerned about the men, all right? Well, when Jefferson writes it, it's shorthand for humanity, right? It's short for everyone, okay? That if you're a human being, all right, which will include the ladies, because there's only 2 genders, by the way, all right? And so all people, okay, so let's just get with that right there, are created, okay? Created. And that's a biblical concept, right? It's not evolution, where people evolved, right? Or government bestows. It's that all men are created. Okay, that's a very important word, that verb, okay? And then we get to the word equal. So in what sense are all men created equal? According to this document. God.
We all have the right to freedom.
Okay. We all have the right to freedom? Yeah, maybe? Okay. See my point here. It's very simple, but people don't really understand what it means. Because I'll just say right now, there's nobody equal. Oh, what did I say? In a sense, I got to qualify this, okay? In one sense, nobody's equal in this room. Okay? No one's equal in this room. Because what it means today is sameness, right? If people want equality, what they mean is everybody should be the same, right? That's insane. Okay? Nobody's the same, okay, in a sense. So for example, in this room, everyone's DNA is different. Everyone's DNA is different, okay? Even if you're male and female, that's a difference, right? Your height is different, your physical features are different, you look different, right? Your fingerprints are different, right? Different, it's all about differences, right? You're intellectually different. Some of you are a little bit smart, some are not so much. Academically, right? Athletically, some of you are more athletically inclined than others, right? Some of you are more inclined maybe towards music, okay, whatever. There's differences all around, okay? So there's inequality in that sense, yes? Okay, and I can extend that throughout, you know, not just the school, but you can talk about your families, you can talk about the country, and so on. So just, you know, that's there. So in what sense are all men created equal? How are we the same? So in other words, we're being, okay, there we go. Okay, see, I just kept moving to that direction. That's right. Griffin mentioned that all people are created in God's image. All right. So spiritually, we're the same, right? In the sense, again, that we're all spiritually, we're all sinners, right? We've all broken God's law. We're all equally in need of God's grace and mercy, right? So that's one aspect of that. But what from a human perspective, how else can we understand that? How about rule of law? Rule of law, okay? Because we're talking again about rights. We're talking about rights, okay? And we'll be talking about life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness here in a little bit. But the point is that we want justice to be blind. Okay, we don't want to have justice for some and not justice for others. Okay, one set of laws for one group and then another set of laws for another group. Unfortunately, that's what we're starting to see in our country. All right, it's supposed to be equal in the sense that, again, right is right, wrong is wrong, and everybody's held equally accountable to those laws. Yes. Okay, so you need to understand what it means that all men are created equal, because you're going to hear about inequality all the time and have no idea how to respond to that. Okay, so that's very relevant to what's going on right now. Now, he's going to go on to say about what it means that they're endowed. So this is by their Creator. There's that God reference there. Okay, with certain unalienable rights. Okay, so they hear the word rights, and if they're unalienable, that means what? Yeah, and this is very, very important. Again, is that government does not give rights. Okay. That if you're made in God's image, as Griffin alluded to or referenced there, is that God gives you rights because you're made in His image, right? And those rights can't be taken away by the government. Okay, and it's important because, again, in our day and age, we have this mentality again is that the government gives rights, but the problem with that is the government can take away those rights too. So we talk about the Bill of Rights. You know, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, right to assembly, right to free press. Okay, all those rights, again, they will say, well, the government gave them to us. No, these are connected to, again, those inalienable rights. Without those rights, we won't have, which are next, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, obviously, these are the big categories here. Life is like kind of important. The government's supposed to promote life, right? Because the opposite is death. And you don't want that, okay? You know, and unfortunately, we have a society, a government that does promote death. Think about abortion. Hurry up, okay? So you have life, right? Liberty. And so this is a big debate right now, okay? In fact, I'm going to be talking about this, I think, on Veterans Day a little bit, about liberty, freedom, okay? What does that even mean? Because again, we have to, in a society for a just society, you know, people need to have freedom. It honors God. It's part of us being responsible. And there's a whole lot of debate about that. And the third one there is that the pursuit of happiness. Now, the pursuit of happiness is directly taken from John Locke. Okay. Now, the key word there is the word pursuit. Okay. Because in our culture, what we want is the guarantee of happiness. This idea that instead of opportunity is that the government should guarantee that I have a job, that I have free education, that I have free medical care, that I have housing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and welfare state. Okay, but the Declaration of Independence does not say the guarantee of happiness. It says the pursuit, right? That means again is that all that our society offers is you the opportunity, right? And with it's an opportunity, that means that's not guaranteed. That if you work hard, if you try, if you're wise, if you do certain things, generally you will do well, right? But the flip side of that again is that if you are not wise and you don't try and you're not disciplined and you don't put in the effort, then you will fail. And people don't want to hear that. You don't like that. because we have this mentality again is that somebody owes me something. And the Declaration of Independence doesn't say government owes you anything except the opportunity. Right? So, it's really important. Moving on. Any questions so far? You're all good? Okay. Goes on and says, and to secure these rights. Okay, so what is government to do? Okay, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That's really super important. We've been talking about that, right? Is that, the authority of government comes from the people, the consent of the people, right? Social contract theory, right? And the reason why we create governments is to secure these rights. And so the government has a job to do, right? And the idea being is, again, if in that contract, if the government doesn't do that job, then something can happen, which is the next line here. Says, and that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute a new government. Okay? So the right to revolution. That if the contract is broken, if the government fails to do what it was created to do, the people have a right to say, let's do a do-over. Let's change it. Right? And that's very radical. And make sure you understand this, is that like even today, people complain about the government. They'll say, or the institutions, they'll say it's racist, or they're,
Okay. If you think that we have like the right to not riot,
Right.
like whatever for.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on the people who like went to the Capitol because
Right.
of Trump's election?
Yeah. Good question. Now, the Constitution protects right of assembly. Okay, that's what assembly is. Okay, the interpretation is they use the word insurrection. Okay, and so there we can get an issue of interpretation here. Is that what is the difference between an assembly, even if it gets a little out of hand, versus a revolution? Like for example, if they went into the Capitol building, they started killing the representatives. They literally were taking over, basically taking over buildings, and then that kind of thing. Yes, that would definitely be. There's a line you cross. Okay, if government officials feel threatened, okay, you would have to prove that in a court of law, and that's a problem because everybody was pulled out. Okay, and a lot of the times the question was did President Trump, did he have any responsibility? Did he instigate it? Did he lead it in any way? That kind of thing. So that was a little separate issue. And it's a good question about, from a biblical perspective, okay, from a biblical perspective, when is it lawful? When is it biblical? When is it right for Christians to resist authority? Okay, and Griffin alluded to that earlier, is that when does that become unlawful? And from a biblical perspective, again, that's not always easy to understand. A lot of times, again, when, for example, the government says, for example, when we get into the fall, into the winter, COVID's kind of arising again. And so if the government said, for example, churches cannot gather together, right? Churches have already determined against that. No, when the Bible says, again, that we are to gather together. Okay, God wants us to come together, so therefore we're going to have to say no to the government. Okay, that would be a biblical example for opposing the government. Okay, but we have to be very careful. Because, like for example, with the founding fathers, a lot of them who were Christians, when they were breaking away from the British government, according to Romans chapter 13, is that they were saying, okay, is this legitimate? In other words, when we have all these grievances and stuff like that, is God okay with us basically taking up arms, fighting, killing against the government? When is tyranny allowable? So, for example, you think of like during the early church, you had a lot of Christians who lived during the Roman Empire, for example, and you don't ever find the Apostle Paul or the apostles telling the early Christians, okay, Nero is a whack job. He's evil. He's persecuting us. He's killing us. So therefore, Christians, you need to go guerrilla. You need to basically start resisting the Roman government and trying to overthrow the Roman government. Okay, you never see that in church history. All right. So this is a complicated question, right? But the reason I'm bringing this up is that It's in the Declaration of Independence, number 1, and you'll see the next line there where Jefferson will say, "You're not to do it for light reasons. That if you do this, this is crossing the Rubicon. Here's our world history reference here. All right, there's a point of no return, and that's why the Declaration is so significant, because they have been debating this, and now the war's already started, and they realize that if they fail, they're all going to die. That they're traitors to the British Crown, and there's a consequence for that. There's the price to pay for that. Okay, but I would just make the thing is, the reason I'm bringing this up is that we're living in times, but you and your children, where, for example, people talk about civil war already. People are saying the country's becoming more and more divided, and the government, if it becomes more corrupt, which it can be more corrupt, and then where do Christians have to draw the line in the sand and say, you know what, no more. That I cannot obey your laws, I will not submit to your authority, I cannot obey you. Okay, because it's very feasible, okay, where they're passing laws where Christians, where as a Christian, I would have never conceived this 30 years ago, right? But I can see them passing laws telling Christians, to do things that you, as biblically and according to your conscience, you cannot obey. And when that time comes, what are you going to do? All right? Because this has already played itself in communist countries and things like that. And so this is a very real practical thing in application-wise. It's a good question. All right, so. Okay, so don't rebel. And also, too, about the whole thing about tearing it all down. You'll have young people today saying, like, well, the system's broken, it's racist and so on, so let's just replace it with something. And my question again is, what are you going to replace it with? Now, in their minds, they're going to have some kind of benign communist, socialist kind of thing, which is just ridiculous. Okay, so, all right, let's move on here. If you get down to kind of the end of the preamble, it'll say here, the history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let the facts be submitted to a candid world. All right, so now we kind of move into the indictment. Is that you have all these, you have the ideology in the preamble about why we should be free and what, and all that. And then you start getting into the next lines where you see he, that's not Michael Jackson, okay? That is King George, okay? And so Jefferson is saying, these are the charges. This is everything that England has done to us, and these are the reasons why we feel justified to declare independence. And you'll notice is that you get in the light blue in the textbook, these are the kind of the historical references where you see all these different things. So for example, the very first one there says, he has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. You go to the next page. I mean, it's quite a long list, right? And so this is really the story of, the American Revolution, where when we get into the events that takes place, is that going back to the French and Indian War, the British government has done this, they've done this, they've done this, they've done this, they've done this, and this is all reasons why we have to separate. Okay, so you'll need to know that for the quiz or actually the homework for today, not so much for the quiz and the test. All right. You get on the next page over on A3 there. Very top says, in every stage of these oppressions, we petition for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. That's Thomas Paine, full on. Okay. And remember, and Jefferson's been pulling from different sources. He's pulling from John Locke. He's pulling from the Bible. He's pulling from Thomas Paine. You get that idea. Now we have been wanting in our attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarranted jurisdiction over us. And remember, we talked about the end of salutary neglect. Salutary neglect, you know what that is, okay? We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration, our settlement here. We have appealed to them, to their native justice and magnanimity. We have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, they got these big words, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and consecutivity, and we must therefore acquiesce in a necessity which denounces our separation and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war and peace friends. Then we have the conclusion. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America and General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world, that's God again, for the rectitude of our intentions due in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that the United Colonies are and right ought to be free and independent states, and they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of the of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have the full power to levy war, conclude peace, etc. These are all things that nations do. And in support for this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, that's God again, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Right? And then you have the signatures. All the members of Congress, they signed you. Of course, John Hancock does the big, really famous signature there. He was the president of Congress at the time. He's not the first president of the Constitution. He's the president of Congress at that time. All right. Any questions up to this point? All right. So the Declaration, yeah. Here.
Can you run by me one more time what salutary neglect is?
Okay. Who remembers what salutary neglect? Okay, Griffith's on a roll today. I mean, I'm just okay. Wait, Lily knows something here. Go ahead.
Isn't that when like never mind.
Okay.
I had it, but I lost it.
Okay. Remember, so what's a memory? People are remembering. Wait.
Because remember Britain, like neglected
Yes.
America, and then took them back whenever they needed stuff.
Okay.
Whenever
Yeah.
whenever they
Okay.
started going,
So
started
your memory peg is the word neglect, because everyone knows what neglect means. All right. And so remember, England, its control of the colonies was very loosey-goosey, right? Unlike France and Spain, right?
Yeah.
And so as they started reinserting their control over the colonies to get money, right, the taxes and so on, the colonies start fighting back on that because they've been independent for so long. They just didn't want, again, they felt we can rule ourselves. We don't need you to tell us what to do, all right? Good, a good question, all right? Okay, so let's talk about your homework for today. It's all about the Declaration, obviously. And one of the questions is going to require you to read something, okay?
Oh.
I know. This is the Annals of America. It's over here. This used to be in every library that was worth anything.
That's true.
And these are really great resources, okay, because they are primary sources, all right, for documentation pertaining to the story of America, all right? And so you've got one question where you'll need to look this up in this book. And so if you run out of time, you can take a picture of the section, all right?
Okay.
So, but it cannot leave my room.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a valuable resource. What's that?